I spent $80,000 on a perfect wedding in Newport, Rhode Island. Yet my sister chose that specific night to turn me into a joke before 300 witnesses. She slipped a colorless liquid into my glass and waited for the show, but I saw it happen. I did not scream or warn her. I simply smiled and let her take the microphone. Some traps do not require a rope, just a crowded room and a toast. My name is Caroline Reed, and I promised myself I would not make a scene. That was the single vow I repeated internally while the officiant asked me for the ones I was supposed to speak aloud to my husband. I stood at the altar of the Seabrier Conservatory in Newport, surrounded by glass walls that held back the crashing Atlantic Ocean, and I told myself that dignity was the most expensive thing I owned. It was certainly worth more than the $80,000 I had spent to curate this evening. The venue smelled of white hydrangeas, sea salt, and the specific, crisp scent of money that seems to permeate the air in this part of Rhode Island. It was perfect. It was engineered to be perfect. As the marketing director for Harborline Creative Group, I made my living controlling narratives and polishing rough edges until they gleamed. I knew how to build a brand, and today, the brand was Caroline and Graham. Graham Carlyle stood next to me, his hand warm and steady against the small of my back. He was the kind of man who did not have to try to be important. He simply was. His family had been in the Northeast for generations, their names stamped on hospital wings and library foundations from Boston to New Haven. When you marry a Carlyle, you do not just marry a man, you marry an institution. You marry into a world where emotions are displayed with restraint and problems are solved with quiet phone calls, not shouting matches in the driveway. I loved Graham for his calm, for the way he looked at me as if I were the only anchor in his life, but I also loved the safety he represented. Being a Carlyle meant being insulated from the chaos, or so I thought. The reception was in full swing. 300 guests filled the conservatory, a sea of black ties and silk gowns moving under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. The jazz band played something smooth and unobtrusive. Waiters moved like ghosts, refilling champagne flutes before they were even half empty. It was the kind of night most women dream of, a pinnacle of social grace, but my eyes were not on the guests, nor on my new husband. They were fixed on the woman sitting to my right at the head table, Sloane Callahan, my sister, my maid of honor. At 29 years old, Sloane was 3 years younger than me, but she had lived a dozen different lives, most of them funded by other people. She called herself a lifestyle influencer. To the 40,000 people who followed her online, she was a curator of beauty, a traveler, a tastemaker. To me, and to anyone who actually knew the balance of her bank account, she was a parasite wrapped in designer silk. Tonight, she was wearing a dress that pushed the boundaries of the dress code I had set. It was a shade of gold that was technically not white, but under the lights, it screamed for attention. She had her phone in her hand, the screen glowing against her manicured fingers, recording a story for her audience. She was filming the table setting, the flowers, the view, and finally, turning the camera on herself to pout and wink. I watched her, my chest tightening. I knew exactly what she was thinking. She did not see a wedding. She saw content. She saw a backdrop. She saw the Carlyle name as a ladder she could climb to reach a higher tier of sponsorship deals. My parents, Martin and Denise, were seated at a table near the front, beaming with a pride that felt performative. Throughout my entire life, the dynamic had been carved in stone. Caroline is the strong one. Caroline can handle it. Sloane is sensitive. Sloane needs help. Since we were children, I had been the designated shock absorber for the family. If there was only one cookie left, I was told to give it to Sloane to stop her from crying. If Sloane broke a neighbor's window, I was the one sent to apologize because I was more articulate. They had weaponized my competence against me. They had raised me to be the adult, so that Sloane could remain a perpetual child. Even this wedding, this sanctuary I had built, had been under siege from the moment Graham proposed. I had wanted a small ceremony. Sloane wanted a gala. I wanted privacy. Sloane wanted a hashtag. When I initially hesitated to make her my maid of honor, knowing her chaotic tendencies, My mother had called me in tears. She told me that I was being cruel, that excluding Sloane would break her heart, that family supports family no matter what. I had relented. I always relented. That was the sickness of the Callahan family. We paid for peace with pieces of ourselves. I took a sip of water, my eyes scanning the room. The contrast between my biological family and my new family was stark. Vivian Carlyle, my mother-in-law, sat 2 tables away. She was a woman of few words but immense presence, dressed in navy velvet, watching the room with eyes that missed nothing. She had welcomed me, but I knew she was evaluating the risks I brought with me, and the biggest risk was currently reapplying lip gloss next to me, checking her reflection in the back of a spoon. Sloane leaned over, invading my personal space. The scent of her perfume, something heavy and floral that clashed with the crisp ocean air, washed over me. "You look tense. Care," she said, her voice dropping to that faux concerned register she used when she wanted to undermine me. "Smile. You are ruining the aesthetic." "I am fine, Sloane," I replied, keeping my voice level. "Just enjoying the moment." "Are you—" She laughed, a sound that was a little too loud, a little too sharp. "You look like you are at a board meeting. Relax. Have a drink. The night is young, and the Carlyles are watching. You do not want them to think you are boring, do you?" Her words were small daggers, aimed precisely at my insecurities. She knew I worried about fitting into Graham's world. She knew I felt the pressure to be perfect. Sloane thrived on this. She thrived on making me feel small so she could feel big. She had spent the last 6 months making my engagement about her. She had tried to dictate the flowers, the music, the photographer. She had thrown tantrums when the vendors I hired refused to give her discounts based on her follower count. She had treated this wedding as her own personal runway, and tonight was the grand finale. I looked at Graham. He was talking to an old friend from Yale, laughing at a joke I could not hear. He looked happy. He looked unburdened. I wanted to protect that. I wanted to keep the toxicity of my family contained within the blast radius of my own patience. I had spent 32 years swallowing my anger to keep the peace. I could do it for 5 more hours. "Just let her have this," my father had whispered to me during the rehearsal dinner, when Sloane had interrupted my toast to make a speech about herself. "She is just excited. Caroline, don't be selfish." Selfish, that was the word they used whenever I drew a boundary. I looked back at Sloane. She was typing furiously on her phone now. I could see the reflection of the screen in the window glass. She was not just posting photos, she was checking engagement metrics. She was responding to comments. She was working the room digitally while ignoring the actual human beings around her. But there was something else in her energy tonight, a frantic, vibrating quality that I recognized from our childhood. It was the energy she had before she did something destructive. It was the look she had before she cut the hair off my favorite doll, or before she told a lie that would get me grounded for a month. Sloane was not just here to attend. She was here to compete. She was jealous. It radiated off her like heat from a pavement. She hated that I had the career, the money, and now, the Carlyle name. She hated that for once. The spotlight was legitimately on me, and no amount of filtering could make her the protagonist of this reality. I watched her hand reach for her wineglass. Her movements were jerky. She took a large gulp, her eyes darting around the room. She was planning something. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, a familiar dread that I had lived with since I was 5 years old. It was the anticipation of the crash. "Is everything okay?" Graham asked, leaning in close to me. He must have felt me stiffen. "Everything is wonderful," I lied. "Just taking it all in." "Your sister seems spirited tonight," he said diplomatically. "She is just being Sloane." I said, "Do not worry about her." But I was worrying. I was analyzing every micro-expression on her face. I was cataloging her interactions. I saw her whisper to a waiter, her hand lingering on his arm a second too long. I saw her glance at the videographer, making sure he was capturing her good side. I saw the way she looked at the microphone on the podium. Measuring the distance, the dinner service began. Waiters placed plates of seared scallops and filet mignon in front of us. The clinking of silverware against fine china filled the air, a polite symphony of consumption. I picked at my food, my appetite gone. The $80,000 I had spent felt heavy in the air. I had paid for perfection. I had paid for a night where I could be the princess, where I could be safe. But you cannot buy safety from your own blood. My phone buzzed in my clutch, hidden under the table. I ignored it. I did not need to look to know it was likely a notification from a guest tagging me in a photo, or perhaps a message from my assistant wishing me luck, or maybe it was a text from my mother, telling me to fix Sloane's hair because it looked a little flat on the live stream. I looked out at the guests, 300 faces, colleagues, friends, Graham's extended family, senators, surgeons, philanthropists. These were people who valued reputation above all else. If Sloane made a scene, if she embarrassed me, it would not just be a bad memory, it would be a social stain. It would be a story told at cocktail parties for the next decade. Did you hear about the Reed girl? The one with the crazy sister? Maybe the Carlyles made a mistake. That was the fear that kept me compliant, the fear of being exposed as trash, despite my resume, despite my tailored suit, despite my elocution. Sloane was the living evidence of the chaos I came from, and she was sitting right next to me, waiting for her moment to drag me back down into the mud. "You know," Sloane said suddenly, not looking at me but staring straight ahead at the room. "Mom and Dad said they were proud of you today." "That is nice," I said, guarding my tone. "They are proud that you finally landed someone who can take care of you," she continued, her voice dripping with poison. "It is a relief, really. We were all worried you were going to end up alone with your spreadsheets." I turned to her slowly. "I take care of myself, Sloane. I always have, and I have taken care of you, too." She laughed again, a harsh, brittle sound. "Oh, here we go. St. Caroline. Always the martyr. You think you are better than us because you have a job and a mortgage? You are just lucky. Care. That is all. You got lucky that Graham likes assertive women. Most men do not." I took a deep breath. This was the bait. She wanted me to snap. She wanted me to raise my voice so she could play the victim. She wanted me to frown so the photographer would catch me looking like a bridezilla while she smiled like an angel. "Enjoy your dinner, Sloane," I said, turning back to my husband. I refused to engage. I refused to let her win. I had built a wall around myself, brick by brick, over 30 years. She could throw stones at it all night, but I would not let her breach it. But then I saw it. It was a small movement, barely a flicker in my peripheral vision. Sloane reached into her purse. She did not pull out her phone. She pulled out something small, cupped in her palm. She glanced at me, then at Graham, then at the room. She looked like a predator assessing the wind direction before a strike. I realized then that my passive strategy was flawed. I had spent my life thinking that if I just ignored the bad behavior, it would go away. I thought that if I was good enough, successful enough, perfect enough, I could outrun my family's dysfunction. But you cannot outrun a shadow that is stitched to your heels. The room felt suddenly very warm. The smell of the lilies became cloying. The jazz music sounded discordant. I looked at the crystal glass in front of me, filled with sparkling water. It caught the light, refracting it into a rainbow. It looked pure. It looked clean. Sloane was tapping her fingers on the tablecloth, a nervous tick, or an excited one. She was waiting for the toasts. That was when the attention would be absolute. That was when the room would be silent. That was when she would have the microphone. I had prepared for this wedding like a military operation. I had spreadsheets for the seating chart, contingencies for the weather, backup plans for the caterer, but I had not prepared a contingency for malice. I had underestimated the depth of her resentment. I had assumed that even Sloane had a baseline of decency, a line she would not cross on the most important day of my life. I was wrong. I looked at her one more time. She was smiling at a waiter, batting her eyelashes, but her eyes were dead. They were empty of joy, empty of love. They were filled only with a hunger for validation. I thought about the little girl I used to be, the one who shared her cookies, the one who took the blame, the one who stayed silent to keep the peace. I thought about that girl, and I decided to let her go. She could not help me tonight. Tonight, I needed to be someone else. The air in the conservatory seemed to shift. The chatter of 300 guests faded into a background hum. My senses sharpened. I could hear the ice melting in the buckets. I could hear the scratch of a chair leg on the floor. I could hear Sloane's breathing, shallow and fast. I had learned to smile at the right time. I had learned to nod and agree and smooth things over. It was a survival mechanism. But as I sat there in my white dress, realizing that my sister viewed my wedding not as a celebration but as a target, the meaning of my smile changed. It was no longer a shield. It was a weapon. I would not make a scene. I would not scream. I would not flip the table. I would do something far more devastating. I would let her play her hand. I would let her think she was in control. And when the moment came, when the trap was sprung, I would ensure that she was the only one caught in it. The night was just beginning. The toasts were coming. And for the first time in my life, I was not afraid of what Sloane Callahan was going to do. I was waiting for it. The coup began on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 months before the wedding. I remember the day clearly because I had just finalized the seating chart with Graham, a task that required the diplomatic skills of a United Nations peacekeeper, and I was feeling a rare moment of accomplishment. I had chosen Kira Vaughn as my maid of honor. It was the only logical choice. Kira and I had met in our freshman year of college, bonded over cheap coffee and shared panic attacks during finals week, and she had remained my moral compass ever since. She was a criminal defense attorney in Chicago now, a woman who could smell deception from a different zip code. She was steady, she was loyal, and most importantly, she actually liked me. I had not even considered asking Sloane. In my mind, Sloane was a guest, a VIP guest, certainly, but a guest. Asking Sloane to handle the responsibilities of a maid of honor organizing the bachelorette party, holding my bouquet, signing the license felt like asking a cat to guard a bowl of cream. It was setting us both up for failure. But I had underestimated the sheer force of the Callahan family narrative. I was at my apartment, reviewing floral contracts, when my mother, Denise, called. She did not say hello. She just sniffed, a wet, tragic sound that she had perfected over 3 decades of emotional warfare. "I just got off the phone with your sister," she said, her voice trembling. "She is devastated. Caroline, absolutely devastated." I closed my laptop, rubbing my temples. "Mom, if this is about the dress code again, tell her—" "It is not about the dress code," she interrupted, her voice rising to a pitch that usually preceded a guilt trip of biblical proportions. "It is about the fact that her own sister, her own flesh and blood, has replaced her with a stranger." "Kira is not a stranger," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "She is my best friend, and being maid of honor is a lot of work. Sloane is busy with her brand. I didn't want to burden her." "Burden her. She has been dreaming of standing by your side since you were little girls." My mother was rewriting history in real time. The only thing Sloane had dreamed of when we were little was pushing me off the swing set, so she could have it to herself. "She is crying her eyes out, Caroline. She thinks you are ashamed of her. She thinks you don't want her in the pictures." "That is ridiculous," I said, though it was partially true. "Your father and I are coming over," she announced. "We need to discuss this as a family." An hour later, Martin and Denise were sitting on my beige linen sofa, looking like they were attending a funeral. My father, a man who usually avoided conflict by hiding in the garage, looked at me with disappointment. My mother was clutching a tissue, dabbing at dry eyes. "We just don't understand why you have to be so difficult," my father said, sighing heavily. "It is a simple title, Caroline." "Why must you always make things so complicated?" "Because it is not just a title," I argued, feeling the familiar walls of the trap closing in. "It is a role. It requires support. It requires focus. Sloane is high maintenance. I need someone who is going to help me, not someone I have to babysit." My mother let out a gasp so sharp it sounded like she had been stabbed. "Babysit? Is that how you see your sister?" the girl who looks up to you, the girl who just wants to be part of your big day." She leaned forward, placing a hand on my knee. "Caroline, look at me. You have everything. You have the big job, the rich fiancé, the fancy house. Sloane is still finding her way. Giving her this role, it would validate her. It would show the world that she matters to you. If you deny her this, you are telling everyone that she is not good enough. Is that what you want? To humiliate your sister publicly?" The logic was twisted, inverted, and entirely effective. They were framing my wedding not as a celebration of my marriage, but as a charity event for Sloane's self-esteem. They were leveraging my success against me, implying that because I was the single one, I had a moral obligation to yield to the fragile one. It was the dynamic of our entire lives condensed into a single argument. "Fine," I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. I was tired. I was so incredibly tired of fighting for boundaries that they would just bulldoze anyway. "She can be maid of honor, but Kira stays in the bridal party." My mother's face instantly cleared, the tragedy vanishing as if she had flipped a switch. "Oh, wonderful. I knew you would do the right thing. I will call her right now. She will be so relieved." When I called Kira to break the news, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I am so sorry," I said, feeling like a coward. They wore me down. "It is easier to just let her have the title than to deal with 6 months of crying." "Caroline," Kira said, her voice sharp and lawyerly, "you know this isn't about love, right? This isn't about sisterhood." "I know," I sighed. "She just wants the attention." "No," Kira corrected me. "She doesn't just want the attention. She wants the platform. She doesn't want to be a maid of honor. She wants to be the star. She is not asking for a role. She is staging a hostile takeover. You need to watch her. If she is standing next to you, she is going to try to eclipse you." "She can try," I said, trying to sound confident. "But it is my wedding. Everyone knows that." "Do they?" Kira asked. "Because from what you have told me about Sloane, she does not see a bride and a groom. She sees a cast and a crew, and she thinks she is the director." Kira was right. Of course, the moment Sloane was officially instated as maid of honor, the demands began. They did not come all at once. They trickled in, disguised as helpful suggestions or aesthetic concerns. First, it was the dress. I had selected a beautiful, understated sage green for the bridesmaids. Sloane rejected it immediately. "Green washes me out," she told me over FaceTime, holding the fabric swatch like it was a dirty rag. "And honestly, it looks a bit suburban. If we want this to look like a true Newport Society wedding, we need neutrals, champagnes, golds, something that screams old money. I am the bride, Sloane," I reminded her. "I choose the colors." "But I am the maid of honor," she countered, batting her eyelashes. "I am supposed to stand out. Right, Mom said I should stand out. I found this dress. It is actually more of a dark gold. It catches the light beautifully. I sent you the link. It is perfect for the content I'm planning to shoot." I clicked the link. The dress was stunning. I had to admit. It was also 3 times the price of the other dresses and looked suspiciously like something a bride would wear to a rehearsal dinner. It was sleek, backless, and demanding of attention. "Fine," I said, simply to end the conversation. "Wear the gold." Then came the timeline. Sloane insisted that we needed a first look, not just for me and Graham, but for me and her. "It is a trend," she explained, her eyes gleaming. "Sisters sharing a moment before the chaos. It performs really well on TikTok. I have already talked to the photographer about blocking out 20 minutes for it." I hired the photographer. "Sloane," I said, my patience fraying. "You do not tell him what to shoot." "I am just helping," she said defensively. "I want you to look good. You're so stiff in photos usually. I know how to find the angles. You should be thanking me." But the true breaking point, the moment I realized Kira's warning was not paranoia, but prophecy, came 2 weeks before the wedding. I was walking into my kitchen to grab a glass of water when I heard Sloane's voice coming from the living room. She was on speakerphone, and she clearly did not hear me approach. No, no, you are not listening to me, Sloane was saying, her voice authoritative and condescending. The florals on the head table need to be lower. If they are that high, they are going to block the shot when I'm giving the speech. We need clear sight lines. And can we add more candlelight near my seat? The lighting in that conservatory can be tricky for video. I froze. She was talking to the florist. My florist. The woman I was paying thousands of dollars to execute my vision. Ms. Reed asked for the tall centerpieces to match the architecture. The florist's voice crackled over the phone, sounding confused. Well, Caroline is just stressed, Sloane lied effortlessly. She delegated the final aesthetic decisions to me. I am the maid of honor. I know what she wants better than she does. Just lower them, and make sure the hydrangeas near seat number 2 are fresh. I do not want any wilting in the background. I stepped into the room. Sloane, she jumped, nearly dropping her phone. Oh, hey, I was just confirming some details for you. Hang up, I said. My voice was quiet, but it must have had a terrifying edge because she actually listened. She tapped the red button and looked at me with wide, innocent eyes. I was just helping, she said quickly. You have so much on your plate. I wanted to take some of the load off. You were changing my design, I said, stepping closer. You were telling my vendors to prioritize your lighting and your camera angles over my preferences. Who do you think is getting married here? Sloane. She rolled her eyes, dropping the innocent act. God, you are so dramatic. I am just trying to make sure it looks high-end. You know how you are. You settle for things. I am elevating it. You want the Carlyles to be impressed, right? Well, I am making sure it looks like a production. It is a wedding, I snapped. Not a production, not a set, not a backdrop for your followers. It is the same thing, she shouted back, standing up. It is all just content, Caroline. Why can't you see that this is the biggest day of your life, which means it is the biggest opportunity for everyone involved? Why are you so selfish that you cannot let me have a few good shots? I am your sister. I stared at her. The entitlement was so pure, so unadulterated. It was almost breathtaking. She genuinely believed that my wedding was a communal resource, a gold mine that she had a birthright to excavate. You are pushing it, Sloane, I warned her. I have given you the dress. I have given you the title. Do not push me on the actual event. She laughed, grabbing her purse. She walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. She looked back at me, a smirk playing on her lips. It was a look of absolute confidence, the look of someone who knows they have a trump card tucked into their sleeve. Relax, Bridezilla, she said. I'm just trying to make sure everything is memorable, especially the reception. I've been working on my toast for weeks. I thought you said you were going to wing it, I said suspiciously. Oh, no, she said, her eyes darkening slightly. This one needs to be precise. It is going to be explosive. Caroline, I mean it. I am going to bring the house down. People are going to be talking about it for years. She said it with a laugh, like it was a figure of speech. She giggled as if she meant she was going to be funny and charming, but as she walked out the door, the air in the room felt cold. Explosive. Bring the house down. They were violent metaphors. I stood there, listening to her car start in the driveway. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself she was just being Sloane dramatic, self-centered, desperate for attention. She wouldn't actually sabotage me. Not in front of the Carlyles. Not in front of 300 people. But as I looked at the floral contract she had tried to alter, I realized that Sloane did not care about the audience in the room. She only cared about the audience in her phone. And for them, a disaster was just as valuable as a fairy tale. Maybe even more so. I picked up my phone and texted Kira. You were right. She thinks she is the director. Kira replied a minute later. Then you need to be the producer. Cut her mic if you have to. I didn't know then how literal that advice would become. I just knew that the battle lines had been drawn. Sloane had her dress, her angles, and her explosive speech, and I had a sinking feeling that I was walking down the aisle toward a landmine. The financial bleeding did not happen all at once. It was a slow, rhythmic drip that I tried to ignore for the sake of my sanity. I told myself that weddings were expensive by nature, and that nickeling and diming my own sister would only make me look petty. But as the date approached, the numbers began to tell a story that had nothing to do with celebration and everything to do with exploitation. It started with the dress. We had already argued about the color and the style, but when the invoice finally arrived, I felt the air leave my lungs. Sloan had selected a designer gown that cost $3,200. It was not a bridesmaid dress. It was a red carpet statement piece, covered in hand-beaded sequins that looked like liquid gold. I called her immediately. "Sloan, this is $3,000, I said, staring at the digital receipt on my screen. "The budget for the bridesmaids was $500. I know, she said, her voice breathless and rushed. "But listen, care. My card got flagged for fraud yesterday because I tried to buy a plane ticket to Tulum. The bank froze everything until they can verify my identity. It is a total nightmare. If I do not pay for the dress by 5 this afternoon, the boutique is going to release the hold. So use a different card," I suggested. "I can't," she whined. "My credit is well. You know I am restructuring my finances right now. Please, Caroline, just put it on your card, and I will Venmo you the second the bank clears the freeze. I promise. I cannot walk down the aisle in something off the rack. It would look disrespectful to the venue." Disrespectful to the venue, that was her new favorite weapon. She knew I was terrified of looking out of place at the Seabriar Conservatory, so she framed every extravagant demand as a necessity for blending in. I paid for the dress. Of course I did. I told myself it was a loan. I added it to a mental tab that I knew, deep down, would never be settled. But it did not stop there. 2 days later, I received an email confirmation from the rental company for the linens. I had ordered ivory tablecloths. The confirmation, however, listed Gatsby gold sequin runners and imported silk napkins for an additional charge of $1,400. I called the vendor, my hands shaking. "Oh, Ms. Reed," the coordinator said cheerfully. "Your sister called us yesterday. She said you wanted to upgrade the head table to make sure it popped on camera. She gave us the card ending in 4092. That was my card. "Did she have the physical card?" I asked, my voice tight. "No. She said she was authorized to use the card on file." The coordinator replied, "She emailed us the approval from your address." I hung up and checked my sent folder. There was nothing there. Then I checked the trash. There it was, an email sent from my account, authorizing the upgrade. Sloan had logged into my laptop when she was over for coffee last week. She had not hacked me. She had simply waited until I went to the bathroom, impersonated me, and then deleted the evidence. When I confronted her, she didn't even apologize. "You are so uptight," she said, rolling her eyes. "I am helping you design. Do you want the head table to look like a cafeteria? I did you a favor. And honestly, looking at how much you are spending on flowers, you can afford a few napkins." It was a violation of privacy, but she treated it like a difference of opinion on interior design. I changed my passwords that afternoon, but the sense of unease lingered. I felt like I was being colonized. My bank account, my email, my choices. They were all slowly becoming property of Sloan Callahan. The next demand was the alcohol. We had a scheduled tasting with the head bartender at the venue, a serious man named Arthur who took mixology as seriously as a chemist. I wanted a simple menu. Champagne, red and white wine, and a classic gin and tonic. Sloan hijacked the meeting 5 minutes in. "Those are boring," she declared, pushing the menu away. "We need a signature cocktail, something that looks good in a boomerang video." Arthur looked at me. I nodded wearily. "What did you have in mind?" "I want something clear," Sloan said, leaning over the bar. "Crystal clear, no fruit floating in it to get stuck in our teeth. But I want it to be strong, like really strong. It needs to look like water but hit like a truck. You know, so we can drink it all night and look elegant, but everyone still gets loosened up." "A martini," Arthur suggested. "No, more complex," she insisted. "Vodka base, maybe some elderflower, but high proof. Call it the golden hour or something, and serve it in those oversized coupes so it looks generous. I watched her face as she described the drink. There was a specific intensity in her eyes. At the time, I thought she just wanted to get drunk on the Carlyle's dime. I thought she wanted to ensure the party was wild enough for her social media content. I did not realize she was engineering a delivery system. A clear, potent drink was the perfect camouflage. If she added something to it, the high alcohol content would mask the taste, and the lack of color would hide any cloudiness. "We can do a strong vodka gimlet with clarified lime," Arthur said, writing it down. "It will be potent." "Perfect," Sloane said, smiling at me. "You will love it. Care. It will help you relax. You are going to need it." That phrase again. You need to relax. It was not a suggestion. It felt like a command. As the wedding week began, the pressure from the Carlyle side of the family became tangible. We hosted a welcome brunch at a seaside club, a casual affair where everyone wore cashmere and discussed their summer homes in Martha's Vineyard. Vivian Carlyle was holding court at a corner table. She was a woman who did not demand attention. She simply possessed it. People leaned in when she spoke. I was terrified of her. Not because she was mean, but because she was a human X-ray machine. She could see through pretense instantly, and Sloane was practically sitting in her lap. I watched from across the room as my sister tried to charm my future mother-in-law. Sloane was wearing a white jumpsuit, another choice that bordered on bridal, and was talking animatedly, using her hands to punctuate her sentences. "I just love what you do for the Children's Hospital," I heard Sloane say, her voice pitched an octave higher than normal. "I am actually looking into starting a foundation myself. I have so much reach with my platform. I feel like it is my duty to give back." Vivian took a small sip of her iced tea. She did not smile. "Is that so? And what cause is your platform currently supporting, Sloane?" "Oh, well, mostly mental health awareness right now," Sloane improvised, stumbling slightly. "And self-love. It is really important for young women." "I see," Vivian said. The two words were dry as dust. She looked at Sloane's gold bracelet, then at her manicured nails, and finally at her eyes. It was a look of absolute dismissal. Vivian knew exactly what Sloane was. She saw the desperation, the grasp, the hollowness. I walked over, desperate to intervene before Sloane said something truly humiliating. "Mother Carlyle," I said, using the formal term she liked, "is the tea to your liking?" Vivian turned her gaze to me. It softened. Just a fraction. "The tea is fine. Caroline, your sister was just telling me about her digital charity work." Sloane beamed, oblivious to the sarcasm. "I was just saying, we should collaborate. A Carlyle-Callahan event would be huge." "We prefer to keep our philanthropy private," Vivian said, standing up. "Excuse me, I need to speak with the caterer." She walked away, leaving Sloane looking confused and slightly annoyed. "She is tough," Sloane muttered, taking a bite of a macaron. "But I will crack her. By the wedding night, we will be best friends. Please leave her alone, Sloane," I hissed. "She is not one of your followers. You cannot charm her with buzzwords." "You are just jealous that I can talk to them," Sloane snapped. "You act like their employee. I act like their equal." I walked away before I lost my temper. I needed a moment of silence. I went to the restroom, seeking the sanctuary of a locked stall. The club's bathroom was lavish, with marble floors and fresh orchids on the vanity. I sat down on the velvet bench in the lounge area, closing my eyes. A moment later, the door opened. Two women walked in. I recognized the click of Sloane's heels. She was talking to someone on the phone. "No, listen to me," she was saying. "The lighting is going to be perfect. I have the ring light set up near the DJ booth." I held my breath. I should have announced my presence, but something stopped me. "Yeah, she is stressed," Sloane continued, laughing. "She is trying so hard to be perfect for these people. It is pathetic, honestly, but that is what makes it good content. The contrast, the perfect bride, and the messy reality." There was a pause as the person on the other end spoke. "Don't worry about that," Sloane said, her voice dropping lower. I have a plan. I just need her to lose control a little bit, just enough to crack that Ice Queen mask she's wearing. Once she starts slurring or tripping, the camera loves it. It makes her relatable, or it makes her look like a train wreck. Either way, the views will be insane. My blood ran cold. Lose control, slurring, tripping. She was not just hoping I would embarrass myself, she was actively planning to facilitate it. She wanted a video of me falling apart. She wanted to monetize my humiliation. Okay, I have to go, Sloane said. Make sure you get the wide lens. I want the whole room to see it when it happens. The door clicked shut. I sat there for a long time. My hands were trembling, but not from fear anymore. It was rage, pure, cold rage. I realized then that my sister was a danger. She was not just a nuisance, she was an adversary. I left the bathroom and found Kira immediately. I pulled her into the bridal suite, locking the door behind us. She is planning something, I said, pacing the room. I heard her. She wants me to lose control. She is bringing someone to film it. Kira listened, her face hardening into her courtroom expression. She did not tell me I was crazy. She did not tell me to calm down. We need eyes, Kira said. If she is planning to drug you or mess with you, she will do it when she thinks no one is watching. But we can make sure someone is always watching. The venue has security cameras, I said. Not good enough, Kira said. We need specific coverage. I am going to talk to the venue manager. We need a camera pointed directly at the head table and another one on the bar service area. We will tell them it is for security because of the high-profile guest list. They will believe it because of the Carlisle name. And the footage, I asked. We asked them to flag it for immediate retention, Kira said. If anything happens, we have the tape. It is called Chain of Custody. Caroline, if she puts something in your drink, I want it in 4K resolution. She mentioned a wide lens. I remembered. She told the person on the phone to bring a wide lens. So she has a cameraman, Kira mused. Is there anyone on the guest list you don't recognize A+1? I pulled up the digital seating chart on my iPad. I scanned the names. The tables were full of Graham's relatives and my colleagues. But then I saw it. Table 14. Sloane was seated at the head table, but she had requested a +1 for table 14. The name was listed as Liam Vance. I had assumed it was a date, a boyfriend of the week. But I Googled the name now. Liam Vance was not a boyfriend. He was a freelance videographer who specialized in viral moments and live streaming events for influencers. His portfolio was full of videos titled Wedding Fails and Bride Meltdowns. She invited a content creator, I whispered, turning the screen to Kira. She did not invite a date. She invited a paparazzo. She is going to live stream it, Kira realized. She isn't just recording it for later, she wants to broadcast it. I looked at the name on the screen, Liam Vance, a stranger invited into my sanctuary to document my destruction. Okay, I said, my voice steady. If she wants a show, we will give her one, but she is not the director anymore. What are you going to do? Kira asked. I am going to let him set up, I said. I am going to let him get his wide lens ready, because if he is filming, he is going to catch everything, including the things Sloane doesn't want anyone to see. The trap was no longer just a metaphor. It was a physical space, defined by camera angles and sightlines. Sloane thought she was setting the stage for my downfall, but she did not realize she was building the courtroom where she would be prosecuted, and the judge, jury, and executioner would be the very audience she was so desperate to entertain. The transition from victim to strategist was not a gradual shift. It was a snap, like a bone setting back into place. Once I realized that Sloane had invited Liam Vance to film my humiliation, the fear evaporated. Fear is a reaction to the unknown, but I knew exactly what was happening now. I was dealing with a hostile entity who had mistaken my silence for weakness. I did not need to scream. I needed to document. I sat in the bridal suite with Kira. The door locked. The room was filled with the scent of hairspray and expensive lilies, but the atmosphere was as sterile as an operating theater. We were not fixing makeup. We were building a perimeter. "We need a chain of evidence," Kira said, her voice dropping into the low, calm register she used when cross-examining a witness. She was pacing the small room, her silk robe rustling. "If she does this, she is banking on chaos. She is banking on the fact that weddings are messy, people get drunk, and memories get blurry. She wants to create a narrative where you are the out-of-control bride and she is the long-suffering sister. We have to make sure the facts are indisputable." "The venue cameras are rolling," I said. "You already handled that." "Not enough," Kira said. "Cameras catch the wide angle. We need details. We need specific eyes on specific vectors." We pulled out the seating chart again. It was no longer a guest list. It was a deployment map. Kira tapped 3 names. "Sarah is sitting near the bar," Kira said, pointing to a friend from law school. "She does not drink. I will text her. Her job is to watch the handoffs. If Sloane goes to the bar, Sarah watches what she takes and where she goes with it." "Okay," I said. "Who else?" "Mark," she said, pointing to a cousin of mine who worked in audio engineering. "He is near the sound booth. If Sloane goes for the microphone, or if she tries to signal the DJ to cut the music for a surprise, he intervenes, or at the very least, he records the interaction." "And the head table?" I asked. "That is the kill zone. That is where she is sitting next to me." "I will watch the table," Kira said firmly. "I am sitting directly across from you. I will not take my eyes off her hands, but we need a fail-safe. If she switches a glass, or if she slips something in, we need to be able to prove which glass is which after the fact." This was the logistical problem. The venue used identical crystal stemware. 400 pieces of lead crystal, indistinguishable from one another. If Sloane slid her glass toward me and mine toward her, it would be impossible to prove later without forensic testing, which we obviously could not do in the middle of a reception. "I have an idea," I said. I picked up the phone and dialed the banquet manager. When he answered, I kept my voice light, breezing past any hint of emergency. "Hi, it is Caroline. I have a tiny neurotic request. You know how the head table has those specific chargers? I need you to do something with the water and champagne glasses for the head table only. Can you place a tiny, clear, adhesive dot on the base of the stem, just a small tactile mark? I want to be able to identify the head table glasses later for sentimental reasons. I want to keep them." It was a lie, but a plausible one for a bride. The manager agreed without hesitation. "Good," I said to Kira as I hung up. "The glasses at the head table will be marked on the bottom. If she brings a drink from the bar, it will not have the mark. If she switches my glass with hers, I will be able to feel the dot. I will know exactly what is in front of my hand without even looking down." We were securing the physical space, but the social space was just as volatile. I needed to manage the Carlyles. I could not tell them that my sister was a sociopath planning to poison me. It would sound hysterical. It would sound like the kind of drama they abhorred. I found Graham in the hallway, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked handsome and serene, completely unaware that his bride was currently running a counterintelligence operation. I walked up to him and placed my hands on his chest. I needed him to be alert, but I could not burden him with the truth, not yet. "Graham," I said softly, "I need you to promise me something." "Anything," he said, smiling. "Tonight is going to be intense," I said, choosing my words with the precision of a surgeon. "My sister is looking for attention, you know that. She might try to make things difficult, if I go quiet, or if I seem like I am not reacting to something. I need you to trust me. Do not intervene unless I ask. Just hold my hand and let me handle it. Can you do that?" He looked at me, his smile fading slightly as he read the seriousness in my eyes. He did not ask for details. That was the beauty of Graham. He respected my competence. "I trust you," he said. "You lead, I follow." That was one flank secured. The other was Vivian Carlyle. I did not have to speak to Vivian. I saw her later, standing near the entrance of the ballroom. Speaking to the event director, she was standing with her back perfectly straight, her posture commanding. I saw her gesture toward the head table, then toward Sloane, who was currently taking selfies in the foyer. I could not hear what Vivian was saying, but I saw the director nod vigorously, looking slightly pale. Vivian was not a woman who needed a police report to know when a crime was being committed. She had been watching Sloane all weekend, she knew, and in her own silent, terrifying way, she was tightening the net. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sloane. "Don't be a prude tonight. Care, drink up. The Carlyles like to have fun. Don't embarrass me by being sober and boring." I showed the screen to Kira. "She is establishing a baseline," Kira said, analyzing the text like it was a piece of evidence in a murder trial. "She is creating a digital paper trail. If you end up stumbling around later, she can point to this text and say, 'See, I told her to loosen up, but I didn't think she would go this far.' She is framing it as you being a lightweight who took bad advice, not a victim who was dosed. It is smart," I admitted. "It gives her plausible deniability. She plays the role of the party girl sister, and I play the role of the lightweight bride who couldn't handle her champagne." "It is premeditated," Kira corrected. "She isn't just seizing an opportunity, she is scripting the fallout." Kira sat down on the sofa and opened her iPad. She had been monitoring Sloane's social media accounts all day, using a secondary account that Sloane did not know about. "Caroline," Kira said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Come look at this." I walked over. Kira was looking at a third-party social media management tool. Sloane used it to schedule her posts across different platforms. Because Sloane was disorganized, she often reused passwords. Kira had guessed her password the name of her first dog plus her birth year on the first try. It was a breach of privacy, yes, but we were past the point of ethical debates. Kira navigated to the drafts folder. There was a photo uploaded. It was a black screen, a placeholder image. But the caption was already written. It was time-stamped for later that evening, scheduled to go live at 10 o'clock. The caption read, "So sad to see my big sister like this. I tried to tell her to slow down. Wedding stress is real. Guys, please send love to the Reed family and respect our privacy while we handle this. Wedding fail too much. Champagne. Poor Caroline." I stared at the screen. The letters seemed to float before my eyes. She had written the eulogy for my reputation before the body was even cold. "She isn't just hoping you get drunk," Kira said, her voice shaking with suppressed anger. "She is planning the press release. She wants to be the first one to break the news. She wants to control the narrative so that when people see the video of you falling or slurring, they already have her context in their heads. She wants pity," I realized. She wants to be the supportive sister dealing with the messy bride. It is the ultimate victim card. I felt a cold calm settle over me. It was a sensation I had never felt before. It was the absolute absence of love. I had spent 32 years trying to love Sloane, trying to protect her, trying to understand her, but looking at that drafted caption, I realized there was nothing there to understand. She was a hollow shell, and she was trying to fill herself up by consuming me. "Screenshot it," I said. "Save it. Email it to yourself. Email it to me. Print it out if we can find a printer." Kira tapped the screen, capturing the image. "Got it. This is it," I said. "We do not need to wait for her to slip up. We have the intent right here." "So what do we do?" Kira asked. "Do we show this to your parents? Do we kick her out now?" "No," I said. "If we kick her out now, she spins it. She tells everyone I am a bridezilla who snapped at the last minute. She cries to mom and dad, and they blame me for ruining the family dynamic. She plays the victim, and she wins." I walked to the window and looked out at the ocean. The waves were crashing against the rocks, relentless and indifferent. "We let her do it," I said. "We let her walk into the room. We let her sit at the table. We let her think she is winning. We let her think I am drinking. We let her think the drugs are working." I turned back to Kira. "And when she stands up to give that toast, thinking she's about to describe my tragic meltdown, we let her be the one who falls apart. We don't just stop her, Kira. We let her expose herself. We let the room see the monster behind the filter." Kira nodded slowly. A grim smile touched her lips. I will tell the team to be ready. The second she steps up to that microphone, the trap is live. I looked at the drafted caption one last time. Please send love to the Reed family. Oh, they will send love, I whispered. But not to who you think. I smoothed the silk of my dress. I checked my reflection in the mirror. I looked perfect. I looked like a Carlyle. I looked like a woman who was about to get married. But inside, I was a prosecutor walking into the courtroom for the closing argument of my life. I opened the door. Let's go get married, I said. The reception hall of the Seabriar Conservatory was less a room and more a glass cathedral dedicated to the worship of wealth and the Atlantic Ocean. The sun had set, leaving the sky a bruised purple that faded into the black water. But inside, the world was golden. 300 guests moved through the space, their laughter bouncing off the floor-to-ceiling windows. The air was thick with the scent of white orchids, expensive perfume, and the salty bite of the sea breeze that managed to sneak in whenever the terrace doors opened. A jazz quartet played in the corner, the saxophone weaving a low, smoky melody that felt sophisticated and timeless. It was exactly the atmosphere I had paid $80,000 to create. It was the perfect stage. And as I walked toward the head table, I felt like an actress stepping onto a set where the props were real, but the safety railings had been removed. I took my seat at the center of the long, rectangular table. To my left sat Graham, my husband. He looked relaxed, his hand resting casually on the white tablecloth. Occasionally waving to a cousin or an old sailing friend, he was in his element here. This world of crystal stemware and understated power was his natural habitat. To my right sat Sloane. The dynamic at the table was immediate and suffocating. Sloane did not sit. She posed. She had angled her chair slightly away from the table and toward the open room, ensuring that her gold dress caught the light from every possible angle. She was frantic, her energy spiking like a fever chart. Every few seconds, she would reach out and touch something in front of me. She adjusted my fork. She moved the salt shaker 2 inches to the left. She smoothed the edge of my napkin. It looked cluttered, she whispered when she saw me watching her. I am just making sure the sightlines are clean. It was a territorial display. She was marking the space, invading my perimeter, testing to see if I would snap. She wanted me to slap her hand away. She wanted me to hiss at her to stop, but I did not move. I sat with the stillness of a statue, my hands folded in my lap, my smile fixed and pleasant. My senses, however, were dialed up to a frequency that made my teeth ache. I could hear the clink of silverware 3 tables away. I could smell the distinct metallic tang of the hairspray Sloane had used. I could feel the vibration of the bass from the band in the soles of my feet. Directly across from the head table, at a round VIP table positioned for the best view, sat Kira. She was not eating, she was not drinking, she was watching. Her eyes were locked on the space between Sloane and me. We made eye contact for a fraction of a second, a silent exchange of data. I am here. I am watching. Hold the line. Vivian Carlyle approached the table then, moving through the crowd like a ship cutting through ice. Guests parted for her instinctively. She wore a midnight blue gown that made her look like royalty, and her expression was one of serene, terrifying appraisal. She stopped behind Graham, placing a hand on his shoulder, but her eyes were on Sloane. "Sloane," Vivian said, her voice smooth and cool. "I see you found the light." Sloane lit up, mistaking the observation for a compliment. She sat up straighter, preening. "Oh, thank you. Mrs. Carlyle, I just think lighting is everything. Don't you? It sets the mood." "Indeed," Vivian said. "It reveals everything, even the things we try to hide in the shadows." The comment went right over Sloane's head, but I felt the chill of it. Vivian knew. She didn't know the specifics, perhaps, but she knew the intent. She knew that Sloane was a foreign contaminant in this ecosystem. Sloane, however, was emboldened by the attention. She leaned in, her shoulder brushing against mine, claiming intimacy with the matriarch. "I was just telling Caroline to loosen up," Sloane giggled, grabbing her wineglass. "She is so stiff. It is a party." right? We are supposed to be wild." Vivian looked at me. There was no judgment in her eyes, only a hard, protective glint. Caroline carries herself with dignity. It is a rare quality these days. She squeezed Graham's shoulder one last time and moved away, disappearing back into the crowd. Sloane's smile faltered for a second, then returned with a vengeance. She turned to me, her voice dropping to a hiss. "She hates me," Sloane muttered. "But whatever. She is old. She doesn't understand the vibe." "She understands more than you think," I said softly, picking up my water glass. "Don't drink that," Sloane said quickly. I froze, the glass halfway to my lips. "Why, water is boring," she said, signaling a waiter. "We need the signature cocktails, the golden hour. Remember I ordered a round for the head table." The waiter appeared instantly, placing a tray of drinks on the table. The cocktails were exactly as Sloane had requested, crystal clear, served in oversized coupes, looking innocent and deadly. They looked like water, but the smell of high-proof vodka and elderflower wafted up, sharp and sweet. "Here," Sloane said, taking a glass and placing it directly in front of me. She took one for herself. "Cheers to the bride, finally letting her hair down." I looked at the glass. I did not touch it. I slid my finger along the base of the stem, searching. There it was, the tiny raised dot of adhesive I had asked the manager to place on the head table glasses. This was my glass. It was safe. Or at least, it was safe for now. "I will wait for the toasts," I said. Sloane's eyes narrowed. She took a sip of her own drink, her gaze darting around the room. She was impatient. She tapped her fingernails on the table, a rhythmic click, click, click that sounded like a ticking clock. Then, the moment arrived. A guest from the third table, an uncle of Graham's who had perhaps enjoyed the open bar a little too much, came over to congratulate us. He clapped Graham on the back, pulling him into a loud, boisterous hug. Graham turned his entire body to the left to embrace him, his back momentarily to me and Sloane. I was looking at the uncle, smiling politely, but in my peripheral vision, I saw the movement. It was fast, incredibly fast. If I had blinked, I would have missed it. Sloane's left hand, which had been resting on her lap, shot up. She didn't hold a vial or a bottle. It was a small, clear capsule she had been palming. She hovered her hand over my glass for less than a second. Her fingers twitched. I saw a tiny ripple on the surface of the liquid, a single drop, maybe two. It dissolved instantly. Sloane's hand was back in her lap before Graham even released the hug. She picked up her fork and stabbed a piece of asparagus, looking completely unbothered. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had expected it. Yes, I had planned for it. But seeing it happen, seeing my own sister poison my drink with the casual efficiency of someone adding sugar to coffee was a physical blow. The cold reality of her hatred washed over me. This was not a prank. This was assault. My phone buzzed against my thigh. I did not need to look to know who it was. But I glanced down at the screen concealed in the folds of my dress. "Do not drink." She did it. I saw the hand. It was from Kira. I looked up. Kira was staring at me, her face pale. She gave a microscopic shake of her head. I took a deep breath, forcing my heart rate to slow down. I needed to act normal. I needed to act like a bride who was happy, distracted, and thirsty. Graham turned back to me, beaming. "Uncle Robert is having a great time." "He is sweet," I said. My voice sounded steady. I was amazed at my own capacity for deception. "You haven't touched your drink," Sloane said. Her voice was casual, but her eyes were locked on the glass in front of me. "It is going to get warm, and warm vodka is gross." "I am just pacing myself," I said. "Come on, care," she pressed, leaning closer. "Just one sip. It will help with the nerves. You look like you're about to snap. Just relax." She pushed the glass an inch closer to me. I looked at the liquid. It was perfectly clear. It looked refreshing. It looked like celebration. Inside that glass was the humiliation she had scripted for me. Inside that glass was the stumbling, slurring, messy breakdown she had promised her followers. And then I saw where she was looking. Sloane was not looking at me. She was looking past me, over my left shoulder, toward the far corner of the room near the DJ booth. I followed her gaze, moving my eyes without turning my head. Standing in the shadows, partially obscured by a large floral arrangement, was a man holding a camera. It was not the official wedding videographer I had hired. It was Liam Vance. He was not filming the crowd or the dancing. His lens was a long, black telephoto barrel, and it was pointed directly at my face. He was waiting. He was waiting for the sip. He was waiting for the first sign of confusion. He was waiting for the moment my eyes would lose focus. Sloane caught me looking and quickly turned back to her plate, feigning innocence. "What are you looking at?" "Nothing," I said, "just admiring the flowers." I realized then the full scope of the production. Sloane was the director. Liam was the cinematographer, and I was the actress who didn't know her lines. She had cued the scene. She was just waiting for me to hit my mark. A cold, hard resolve settled in my stomach, displacing the fear. I looked at the glass again. I knew exactly what I had to do. I could not just leave it there. If I left it, she would know I knew. She would try another way. She would escalate. I needed her to think she had won. I needed her to believe that the poison was in my system. "You are right," I said, turning to Sloane with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I should relax. It is my wedding night, after all." Sloane's eyes widened. A flash of triumph crossed her face, raw and ugly. She watched as I reached for the glass. My hand hovered over the stem. I felt the tiny adhesive dot on the bottom, my glass, the poisoned glass. "Actually," I said, pausing, "I need to use the ladies' room first. Graham, hold this for me." I didn't hand it to Graham. I simply set it down firmly on the table, slightly to the left, closer to his setting, but distinctly still in my zone. "Hurry back," Sloane said, her voice tight with impatience. "The toasts are starting in 10 minutes. "I will be right back," I promised. I stood up, smoothing my dress. As I walked away from the table, I felt the lens of Liam Vance's camera tracking me. I felt Sloane's eyes burning into my back. She was watching the glass. She was guarding it. She was so focused on the weapon she had created that she had forgotten one crucial rule of warfare: never take your eyes off the opponent. I walked toward the bathroom, but I caught Kira's eye as I passed. She stood up and followed me. Slipping into the hallway a few seconds later, we met in the small vestibule outside the restrooms, away from the noise of the band. "She dropped it in," Kira whispered, her voice shaking. "It was a capsule, clear. It dissolved in seconds." "I know," I said. "I saw the ripple." "What are we going to do?" Kira asked. "We have to call the police, or security. We can't let this go on." "Not yet," I said. "If we call them now, it is her word against mine. She will say it was a sweetener. She will say it was a vitamin. She will say I am crazy. The glass is still on the table. We don't have the proof of what is inside it yet." "So we get the glass," Kira said. "No," I said. "We get the confession." I looked at Kira. "I am going back out there. I am going to sit down, and I am going to switch the glasses." Kira stared at me. "Caroline, that is insane. If you mix them up—" "I won't mix them up," I said. "The dot? Remember the dot? My glass has the dot. Her glass does not. I am going to switch them, and then I am going to tell her it is time for the toast." "You are going to make her drink it?" Kira asked, her eyes widening. "I am not going to make her do anything," I said coldly. "She is the one who ordered the drinks. She is the one who insisted we toast. I am just going to ensure that the person who drinks the poison is the person who brought it. But if she passes out, if she gets sick—" "There are paramedics on standby for the event," I said. "It is standard protocol for a gathering of this size. She will be safe medically, but socially, she is going to die out there." I checked my makeup in the mirror. I looked pale, but fierce. "She wants a show." "Kira," I said. "She hired a cameraman. She set the lighting. She wrote the script. It would be rude not to give her a performance." I turned back toward the ballroom. The music had swelled. The chatter was louder. The air felt electric with the impending disaster. "Watch the table," I told Kira. "And tell the venue manager to secure the footage from the last 5 minutes. We need that drop on tape." "Consider it done," Kira said. I walked back into the room. The lights seemed brighter now. The noise seemed sharper. I walked toward the head table, where my sister sat, waiting for me like a spider in a sequined web. She looked up as I approached, her eyes darting to the glass that was still sitting exactly where I had left it. She smiled. It was a hungry smile. "Back just in time," she said. "Just in time," I repeated. I sat down. I reached for the glass, and I prepared to execute the sleight of hand that would cost me a sister but buy me my freedom. The glass sat on the white linen tablecloth, sweating beads of condensation. To anyone else in the ballroom, it was just a cocktail, a blend of premium vodka, elderflower liqueur, and ice. But to me, it was a loaded gun that had been placed on the table with the safety off. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, listening to the hum of conversation that filled the conservatory. The jazz band had shifted into a faster tempo, something upbeat and chaotic that clashed with the cold, linear focus of my mind. I was not looking at the guests. I was not looking at my husband. I was looking at the physics of the table in front of me. Sloane was busy typing on her phone, her thumb flying across the screen with manic intensity. She was likely updating her story, perhaps posting a teaser about the emotional speech she was about to give. She was so confident. That was her fatal flaw. She believed that because she was the predator, she was untouchable. She believed that I was the prey, the passive, compliant older sister who would swallow whatever poison was fed to her just to keep the peace. I knew her plan now. It was elegant in its cruelty. She wanted me to drink the dosed cocktail right before the toasts. The drug, whatever it was fast-acting. I had seen it dissolve in seconds. If I drank it now, the effects would hit me just as the attention of the room shifted to the head table. I would look glazed. I might slur my words. I might stumble. And Sloane, the dutiful maid of honor, would be there with the microphone in her hand, narrating my disintegration to 300 people and a live stream audience. She would look like the saint holding up the sinner. I could not simply knock the glass over. That would cause a scene. It would bring the waiters, the manager, and unwanted attention. I could not pour it into a potted plant. We were at a head table, elevated on a dais, visible from every angle. I had to be smarter. I had to be invisible. I needed a distraction, not a fire alarm, but a social shift, something that would compel Sloane to turn her body completely away from the table for 3 seconds, as if summoned by my desperation. Vivian Carlyle appeared. My mother-in-law was making her rounds, moving through the tables with the grace of a queen visiting her subjects. She was approaching the head table from the rear right Sloane's side. Vivian was not coming to talk to us. She was heading toward the venue coordinator who was standing near the kitchen doors. Sloane saw her. I felt the change in her posture immediately. It was a physical jolt, like an electric current hitting a wire. Sloane was obsessed with Vivian. She was obsessed with the validation that the Carlyle matriarch represented. If she could get a photo with Vivian, or even just be seen laughing with her, it would be the crown jewel of her social media content for the night. "Oh my God, there is Vivian," Sloane whispered, more to herself than to me. She smoothed her hair frantically. "I need to ask her about the Hamptons house. I read that they are renovating it." This was it. Sloane stood up. It was a breach of protocol. The bridal party usually remained seated until the toasts began, but Sloane did not care about protocol. She cared about access. "Mrs. Carlyle?" Sloane called out, her voice pitched high and sweet. She turned her back to the table, stepping away from her chair to intercept Vivian before she could reach the kitchen. "Mrs. Carlyle? Wait, you have to tell me who did your gown." Vivian paused, turning slowly. Her expression was one of polite fatigue, but she stopped. Sloane was now fully turned away from me, her back acting as a screen between her eyes and the table. Her body blocked the view of the guests seated to our right. Graham was to my left. currently deep in conversation with his best man, looking away from me. The window of opportunity was open. It was narrow, perhaps 3 seconds wide, but it was open. I did not hesitate. I did not think about the morality of what I was doing. I did not think about the potential medical consequences. I thought only of the camera lens pointing at me from across the room and the captions Sloane had already written for my downfall. My hands moved with the precision of a card dealer. I reached out with my left hand and grabbed the stem of my glass, the one with the poison, the one with the tiny adhesive dot on the bottom. Simultaneously, I reached out with my right hand and grabbed Sloane's glass, the clean one, the one she had been drinking from earlier. I lifted them less than an inch off the tablecloth. I did not cross my arms. That would be too obvious. Too large a movement. Instead, I slid them. I slid my glass to the right, into Sloane's position. I slid her glass to the left, into mine. The movement was horizontal, low, and fluid. The crystal stems made a faint whispering sound against the linen, a sound that was instantly swallowed by the jazz music. It took less than 2 seconds. I released the stems. I sat back, folding my hands in my lap exactly as they had been before. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but my face remained a mask of boredom. I looked across the room. Kira was watching. She had not blinked. She was holding her phone up, ostensibly taking a photo of the floral arrangements, but the lens was trained on the head table. She gave me a microscopic nod. She had seen it. And more importantly, the security camera located in the upper corner of the conservatory, the one Kira had ensured was recording, would have seen it too. The chain of custody was secure. The poison had been introduced by Sloane. The swap had been executed in self-defense. If anyone analyzed the footage later, they would see Sloane doping the glass, and they would see me switching them. I had not added anything. I had not tampered with a substance. I had simply rearranged the furniture. Sloane was still talking to Vivian, unaware that the tectonic plates of her plan had just shifted. "It is vintage Valentino, isn't it?" Sloane was gushing, reaching out to touch Vivian's arm. "I just knew it. You have such an eye." Vivian looked at Sloane's hand on her arm, then back at Sloane's face. She gently, but firmly, stepped back, breaking the contact. "It is custom, actually," Vivian said, her voice cool. "And I really must speak to the caterer. Sloane, we are on a schedule." Vivian turned and walked away, leaving Sloane standing there with a frozen smile. Sloane let out a huff of annoyance, rolling her eyes as she turned back to the table. She sat down heavily, adjusting her dress. "God, she is so icy," Sloane muttered, picking up her napkin. "She acts like she is royalty. Whatever. Once I am in the family circle, she will warm up." She looked at the table. She looked at the 2 glasses. They were identical. Same shape, same amount of liquid, same clear, innocent color. I held my breath. This was the moment of truth. Would she notice? Would she sense that the universe had tilted? Sloane reached out. Her hand hovered for a fraction of a second. She bypassed the glass on the left, the clean one, now sitting in front of me. She grabbed the glass on the right, my glass, the poisoned glass. She lifted it to her lips. "Well," she said, looking at me with a smirk. "Bottoms up. Sis, we have a show to put on." She took a long, defiant sip. I watched her throat work as she swallowed. She didn't just take a polite taste. She took a substantial gulp, as if she needed the liquid courage to execute the final phase of her plan. "It is good," she said, licking her lips. "You should drink yours. Seriously." "I will," I said. "In a minute." I watched her set the glass down. It was done. The chemical reaction was now a biological certainty. It was inside her. The trap she had built for me was now coursing through her own veins. I felt a strange sensation wash over me. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't joy. It was a cold, clarifying relief. I had spent my entire life protecting Sloane from the consequences of her own actions. I had bailed her out of debt. I had lied for her. I had cleaned up her messes. But I could not clean this up. I could not protect her from her own malice. "We should start the toasts," I said, checking my watch. "The band is winding down." Sloane's eyes lit up. She grabbed her phone and checked her reflection in the camera app one last time. She fluffed her hair. She checked her teeth. "Finally," she said. "I have been waiting for this all night." She stood up. She grabbed the microphone that had been placed on the table for her. She looked out at the room of 300 people. To her, it was an audience. She saw fans. She saw followers. She saw a sea of people waiting to be entertained by her wit and her beauty. She thought she was stepping onto a stage where she would shine while I crumbled in the background. She did not realize she was stepping into a courtroom. "Do it," I said softly. "They are all looking at you." Sloane beamed at me. It was a smile of pure predation. "Don't worry, Caroline, I will make sure they never forget this night." "I know you will," I replied. She turned to the crowd, tapping the microphone. Thump, thump, the sound echoed through the conservatory, silencing the room. The jazz band stopped playing. The waiters paused in their tracks. 300 faces turned toward the head table. Sloane stood tall, the golden sequins of her dress catching the light of the chandeliers. She held her glass, the poisoned glass, in one hand and the microphone in the other. She looked powerful. She looked triumphant. I looked past her. Toward the far corner of the room, Liam Vance had come out of the shadows. He had moved closer, positioning himself for the perfect shot. He raised his camera, the red light blinking. He was recording. Good. I wanted him to record. I wanted every pixel of this to be preserved. Sloane brought the microphone to her lips. Her eyes were bright, almost feverish. The drug hadn't hit yet, or if it had, it was manifesting as a burst of manic energy before the crash. "Good evening, everyone," she announced, her voice booming through the speakers. "For those of you who don't know me, I am Sloane, Caroline's better half." A ripple of polite laughter went through the room. Sloane winked at the crowd. I sat back in my chair, interlacing my fingers. I felt Graham's hand cover mine under the table. He gave it a squeeze, sensing the tension in my body. "I am okay," I whispered to him, and I was, for the first time all day. I was completely, totally okay. I watched my sister. She took another sip of the drink. She was pacing herself. She thought she was using the alcohol as a prop. She had no idea that the clock was ticking. She had no idea that inside her body, the chemistry of her own betrayal was beginning to rewrite the script she had memorized. She thought she was the storyteller, but tonight, she was the story. "I have so much to say about my sister," Sloane continued, her voice dripping with fake sentiment. "So many stories that she probably doesn't want me to tell, but hey, what are sisters for, right?" She looked down at me, her eyes gleaming with malice. She was waiting for me to look woozy. She was waiting for my eyelids to droop. I looked back at her, my eyes clear, sharp, and focused. I gave her a small, encouraging smile. "Go on," my eyes said. "Dig the hole. It is all yours." Sloane frowned slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. She expected to see the glaze. She expected to see the fear. Instead, she saw a mirror reflecting her own sins back at her. She shook it off, turning back to the crowd. But I saw the hand holding the glass tremble. Just a little. The game had changed, and the curtain was just going up. The master of ceremonies, a man with a baritone voice that sounded like it had been dipped in expensive scotch, stepped to the center of the room. He tapped the microphone twice, a hollow thudding sound that echoed off the glass walls of the conservatory. The ambient chatter of 300 guests began to die down, replaced by the rustle of silk and the scraping of chair legs as people turned their attention toward the stage. The house lights dimmed, casting the room into a moody, intimate twilight, while a series of spotlights swiveled to focus intensely on the toast area. This was the signal. The arena was open. Sloane stood up immediately. She did not wait to be introduced. She moved toward the designated speaking area with a predatory swiftness, her gold dress shimmering under the concentrated beams of light. I watched her from my seat. observing her movements with the detachment of a scientist watching a lab rat navigate a maze. She did not go straight to the microphone stand. Instead, she paused, grabbed the stand with one hand, and physically dragged it 3 feet to the left. The screech of metal on the marble floor made several guests wince, but Sloane did not care. She was adjusting her backdrop. She wanted to ensure that the floor-to-ceiling window behind her framed the moonlit ocean perfectly. She was composing the shot. To her, this was not a speech for my wedding. It was a monologue for her personal brand. She checked her reflection in the dark glass of the window, smoothed her hair, and then turned back to the room with a smile that was practiced, polished, and entirely hollow. While Sloane was busy curating her stage, I looked across the room toward the tech booth. It was located in the back corner, a nest of monitors and soundboards manned by a technician in black. I saw Kira Vaughn standing there. She was not supposed to be there. She was supposed to be in her seat, but she was leaning over the technician's shoulder, handing him a small silver USB drive. I knew exactly what was on that drive. It was a file labeled Backup Slideshow, which I had sent to Kira 3 days ago. I had told her it contained childhood photos that I wanted to have on hand just in case the main presentation failed. That was technically true. But the photos I had selected were not the cute, curated memories my mother had chosen for the official montage. They were the outtakes, the reality, and more importantly, the file contained a direct link to the security feed buffer, a technical request Kira had made earlier under the guise of legal documentation. Kira caught my eye from across the darkened room. She gave a single, sharp nod. The tech guy was plugging the drive in. The trap in the ceiling was armed. The trap in the glass was already deployed. Now, we just needed the trap in the microphone. I turned my attention back to the table. I needed to sell the narrative. If Sloane looked at me and saw me alert and focused, she might hesitate. She might cut her speech short. I needed her to believe that her plan was working. I needed her to believe that I was fading. I let my shoulders slump slightly. I allowed my eyelids to grow heavy, blinking slowly as if I were fighting off a wave of exhaustion. I reached for my water glass, the safe one, but I deliberately let my hand tremble. Knocking a spoon against a saucer with a loud clatter, Graham turned to me instantly, his face etched with concern. "Caroline, are you all right?" "I feel a little heavy," I whispered, slurring the word heavy, just enough to be audible to the people sitting nearby. I rested my forehead on my hand, shielding my eyes from the glare of the spotlights. From the corner of my eye, I saw Sloane glance at me. She was standing at the microphone now, holding her poisoned glass in her left hand. When she saw me leaning on my hand, looking weak and disoriented, her smile widened. It was a subtle shift, but I saw it. Her shoulders relaxed. She felt safe. She believed the chemical agent was coursing through my blood, stripping away my defenses. She believed she had won before she had even spoken a word. Vivian Carlyle was less easily fooled, but her reaction was exactly what I had anticipated. She was standing near the edge of the dance floor, speaking to the venue manager, a man named Henri. I could not hear her words, but I could read her body language. She gestured toward me, then toward the kitchen. She was undoubtedly telling him to have water and perhaps a medical kit on standby. Vivian suspected I was intoxicated, or ill. She was preparing to manage a crisis. She was preparing to save the Carlyle reputation from a messy bride. She had no idea she should have been preparing to save the maid of honor from a public execution. Graham placed his hand on my back, his touch grounding. "I am going to get you some water," he said quietly. "You look pale." I reached out and grabbed his hand. Squeezing it hard, I squeezed it 3 times. 1, 2, 3. It was a code we had never verbally agreed upon, but one that he understood instinctively. It was a request for trust. It was a command to hold his position. "No," I whispered, lifting my head just enough to look him in the eyes. "Stay, please. Trust me. Just watch." He looked at me, searching my face. He saw the glaze I was faking, but deep in my pupils, he must have seen the iron resolve I was hiding. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. He sat back, but he kept his hand on mine, his grip protective. "Okay," he said. "I am here." At the microphone, Sloane tapped the grill again. "Testing. Testing. Can everyone hear me in the back? I know the acoustics in here can be tricky." Her voice was loud, confident, and brimming with the self-importance of someone who believes they are the main character. "Hey, guys," she shouted, waving to the back of the room. "Welcome to the show." It was an odd way to start a wedding toast, but no one corrected her. The guests shifted in their seats, polite smiles plastered on their faces, waiting for the heartfelt sentiments that usually followed. Then, the second screen lit up. To the right of the stage, slightly behind where Sloane was standing, was a secondary tripod setup. It was Liam Vance. He had moved into position. He held a professional gimbal stabilizer with a high-end smartphone attached to it. The screen of the phone was bright, and I could clearly see the red, live icon pulsing in the corner. He wasn't just recording for a later edit. He was live streaming. He was broadcasting this moment to Sloane's 40,000 followers, and likely to whatever viral aggregator sites he contributed to. Sloane looked at Liam and gave him a wink. She knew she was live. She wanted the world to see this. She wanted the internet to witness the contrast between her glowing vitality and my impending collapse. "So," Sloane began, leaning casually against the podium, "my sister Caroline. What can I say? We have been through a lot together, mostly me waiting for her to loosen up." A few people chuckled nervously. It was a dig, but it was disguised as banter. "But seriously," Sloane continued, taking a sip from her glass, I watched the liquid disappear. It was the second significant sip she had taken. The first one had been at the table. This one was the chaser. "Caroline has always been the responsible one, the perfect one, the one who never makes a mistake." She paused for effect. Looking down at me, I played my part. I let my head loll slightly to the side, my eyes unfocused. I saw a flash of pure glee in Sloane's eyes. She thought I was drunk. She thought the golden hour cocktail was doing its work. "But tonight," Sloane said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that boomed through the speakers. "Tonight, I think we are finally seeing the real Caroline, the one who knows how to party, maybe a little too much." She laughed, expecting the room to laugh with her, but the room remained silent. The guests were confused. They looked at me, sitting quietly next to my husband, and then back at Sloane. They did not see a rowdy drunk. They saw a tired bride. The narrative Sloane was trying to spin was not matching the visual evidence, but she was too focused on her script to notice. And then, it happened. Sloane went to take another sip of her drink, but her hand missed her mouth by an inch. The glass bumped against her chin, splashing a small amount of liquid onto the bodice of her gold dress. "Oops," she said, giggling. "Party foul." She wiped at the spot, but her movements were jerky, uncoordinated. "Anyway," she said, looking back at the camera, "I wanted to tell you all a story about when we were kids. Caroline always wanted to be the queen always." She stopped, her brow furrowed. She looked at the microphone as if she had forgotten what it was for. The silence stretched for 3 seconds, 4 seconds. It was dead air, heavy and uncomfortable. "She wanted to be," Sloane repeated. Her words were beginning to slur. The consonants were losing their edges. "She wanted to be the queen. But you know what they say." She swayed. It was a slight movement, like a tree in a breeze, but on the raised platform, under the unforgiving spotlight, it was magnified. "What do they say?" she asked the room, her voice rising in pitch. She sounded frustrated, like the words were stuck in her throat. "They say wait. What was I saying?" She looked at Liam Vance. She looked for the reassurance of the camera, the digital validation that usually sustained her. But Liam looked confused. He lowered the gimbal slightly, frowning at the screen. The comments on the live stream must have been starting to turn. This was not the witty, charming takedown she had promised. This was something else. "It is hot in here," Sloane announced suddenly. She pulled at the neckline of her dress. "Is anyone else hot? Can we turn the air on?" Vivian Carlyle stepped forward from the shadows near the wall. She signaled to the venue manager, pointing discreetly at the stage. She knew. She recognized the signs of someone losing control, even if she didn't understand the cause. Sloane saw Vivian move. "No. Sit down." Sloane snapped into the microphone. Her voice was aggressive now, stripping away the influencer veneer. "I am talking. I am the maid of honor. You have to listen to me." The room gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the conservatory. You did not yell at Vivian Carlyle. You did not yell at guests. Sloane blinked rapidly, her eyes wide and panicked. She shook her head, as if trying to clear a fog. The drug was hitting her hard now. It wasn't just alcohol. It was something faster, sharper. It was stripping her of her filter, her balance, and her cognitive mapping. "I just wanted," Sloane stammered. She gripped the podium with both hands to steady herself. The glass she was holding tilted dangerously. "I wanted everyone to see. I wanted you to see her." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "Look at her," Sloane commanded. "Look at St. Caroline. She thinks she is better than me. She thinks she bought this life. $80,000. Can you believe she spent $80,000? She laughed, but it came out as a harsh, jagged sound. "And she wouldn't even let me have the song I wanted." She was rambling. The logic was disintegrating. I sat up straight. I dropped the act. I opened my eyes fully, letting the mask of exhaustion fall away. I looked at Sloane with absolute clarity. I wanted her to see me. I wanted her to see that I was sober. I wanted her to realize, in the foggy haze of her own mind, that the target had moved. Sloane squinted at me. She saw me sitting tall. She saw my clear eyes. She saw the glass of water in my hand. Confusion washed over her face. She looked at the glass in her own hand, the glass I had given her. "Wait," she whispered into the microphone. The amplification made the whisper sound like a ghost in the room. "That is not right." She looked at Liam. The red light on his camera was still blinking. The live stream was still running. "Liam," she said, her voice trembling. "Cut it. Cut the feed." But Liam did not cut the feed. He was a videographer who specialized in viral moments, and he knew, with the instinct of a vulture, that he was filming the most viral moment of his career. He kept the camera rolling. Sloane stumbled back, her heel catching on the hem of her dress. She flailed, grabbing the microphone stand for support. The feedback shrieked a high, piercing noise that made everyone cover their ears. "I don't feel good," Sloane mumbled. "I don't." She looked at the 300 witnesses. She looked at the Carlyles. She looked at the phone screen that was broadcasting her meltdown to the world. The trap had snapped shut. The cage door had locked. And she was the one inside, holding the key that she had melted down and swallowed. "Caroline," she said, her voice sounding very small and very young. "Caroline, what did you do?" I did not answer. I did not have to. The microphone was doing all the work for me. I just sat there, my hand in Graham's, and watched the house that Sloane built come crashing down. The silence in the conservatory was not empty. It was heavy, textured with the held breath of 300 people and the low, static hum of the microphone system. Sloane stood at the podium, gripping the metallic neck of the stand as if it were the only thing anchoring her to the earth. She had recovered, momentarily, from her initial stumble. The influencer in her that trained, performative reflex had kicked in, smoothing over the cracks in her composure with a veneer of practiced charm. She smiled at the crowd. It was a dazzling smile, bright and wide, but her eyes were blinking too fast. It was the blink rate of a computer trying to process a corrupted file. "But seriously," Sloane said, her voice dropping into a register that was meant to be intimate and heartwarming, "let us talk about Caroline, my big sister, the standard-bearer." She turned slightly to look at me. I sat frozen, my hands clasped on the table, offering her nothing but a blank canvas. "Growing up," Sloane continued, her words flowing with a sugary smoothness that I recognized instantly. It was her brand deal voice. "Caroline was the one who did everything right. She got the grades. She followed the rules. She never colored outside the lines. Honestly, it was exhausting just watching her. A few guests chuckled politely. It was a standard maid of honor trope, the roasting of the perfectionist bride. Mom and Dad used to say, "Sloane, why can't you be more like Caroline?" She laughed, but the sound had a sharp, serrated edge. And I would think, why would I want to be boring? Why would I want to be safe? She paused, taking a long sip from her glass. I watched the liquid level drop. She swallowed hard, grimacing slightly as if the taste was suddenly wrong. But she pushed through it. "But look at her now." Sloane gestured to me with the glass, liquid sloshing dangerously near the rim. "She finally did something exciting. She married a Carlyle." She pivoted away from me, turning her full attention to the tables where Graham's family sat. Her body language shifted. She was no longer addressing the bride. She was auditioning for the in-laws. "The Carlyle family," Sloane sighed into the microphone, the sound breathy and amplified. "You guys are the real deal. I mean, look at this room. Look at this view. This is what class looks like. This is what I have always vibrated with. You know? Some people are born to fit into this world, and some people just buy a ticket." The room stiffened. The compliment was backhanded, implying that I was the tourist and she was the native, despite the fact that I was the one in the white dress. "I just want to say to Vivian and Grant," Sloane pointed a finger at Graham's parents, "you guys have welcomed us well. You have welcomed me with open arms, and I want you to know, I am going to be around a lot. I feel like we are soulmates. Honestly, the Hamptons, the galas, I am ready for it. I was made for it." Vivian Carlyle did not smile. She sat perfectly still, her face a mask of granite. She was watching Sloane's hands. Sloane's left hand, the one holding the glass, was starting to drift. It was trembling. A fine, high-frequency vibration that made the ice cubes clink softly against the crystal. Tink, tink, tink. The sound was picked up by the microphone, a rhythmic underscore to her unraveling. "But back to Caroline," Sloane said, pivoting back to me. Her movements were lagging behind her words now. She turned her head, and her body followed a second later. "My perfect sister, the director of marketing. She controls everything, doesn't she? She controls the narrative. She controls the image." Sloane squinted, leaning over the podium. Her face was flushed, a blotchy red creeping up her neck. The drug was working fast. It was stripping away the cognitive filters that usually kept her envy in check. "I tried to help her with this wedding," Sloane told the crowd, her voice turning whiny. "I tried to give it some flavor, some spice, but she wanted it sterile. She wanted it safe." She laughed again, a harsh, dry sound. "Safe, that is Caroline. But tonight is not safe, is it?" She looked at me, her eyes widening. She was expecting to see me slumped over. She was expecting to see my head on the table. She was expecting the chaos she had engineered. But I was sitting upright. I was watching her with the cool, clinical detachment of a judge. Sloane blinked. She rubbed her temple with her free hand, knocking the microphone with her wrist. A loud thump reverberated through the speakers. "Sorry," she mumbled. "Whoa, head rush." She gripped the podium tighter. Her knuckles were white. She looked at the glass in her hand, then at me. A flicker of confusion crossed her face, the first crack in the dam. "I just thought," she started, then stopped. She licked her lips. Her mouth was dry. "I thought you would be having more fun by now. Care. I really did." She leaned into the mic, her voice dropping to a whisper that was meant to be conspiratorial, but sounded accusatory. "I just wanted you to be less awake. Just a little bit." The silence in the room changed. It went from awkward to alarmed. Less awake. It was a strange, specific choice of words. "I mean, loosen up," Sloane shouted suddenly, trying to correct the slip. "Just relax, God. You are so stiff. Why are you looking at me like that?" Her aggression was spiking. The chemical cocktail was fighting with her adrenaline. She was angry that the script wasn't being followed. She was angry that the victim wasn't playing the victim. "Sloane." My father stood up from his table, his face red with embarrassment. Maybe that is enough. Honey, let's sit down. No, Sloane snapped, whipping her head around. Sit down, Dad. I am not finished. I am the maid of honor. I have the floor. She turned back to me, her eyes wild. The pupils were dilated, swallowing the irises. She looked deranged. You think you are better than me, she hissed. It wasn't a speech anymore. It was a confrontation. You think because you married him, you won, but I am the one who makes things happen. I am the one people watch. She gestured to Liam Vance, who was still filming. 40,000 people are watching me right now. Caroline, not you, me. She took another drink, a big one. She drained the glass. I watched the final drops disappear. It was done. The entire dose was inside her. Sloane slammed the empty glass down on the podium. It shattered. The sound was like a gunshot. Shards of crystal skittered across the floor. Oops, she said, looking at the broken glass. She didn't seem startled. She seemed fascinatingly detached. Broken. Everything breaks. Even you. Caroline. She looked at me, swaying heavily. The room was spinning for her now. I could see it in the way she grabbed the mic stand to keep from falling backward. Why aren't you funny yet? She asked, her words slurring badly. You were supposed to be messy. I made it so you would be messy. A gasp rippled through the room. Graham stiffened beside me, his hand tightening on mine until it hurt. What did she say? Someone whispered at a nearby table. Sloane heard the whisper. She tried to laugh, to cover it up, but her brain was misfiring. The logic centers were shutting down, leaving only the raw, unvarnished truth. It was a joke, she said, waving her hand dismissively. Just a prank? A sister prank? I just put a little something. She stopped. Her hand flew to her mouth. She realized, in a hazy, terrifying second, that she was saying the quiet part out loud. She looked at the guests, 300 faces staring at her in horror. She looked at Kira. Kira was sitting back in her chair, arms crossed, a look of grim satisfaction on her face. Kira wasn't moving to stop her. She was letting the tape roll. Sloane looked back at me. Her eyes tried to focus on my face. She looked at the water glass in my hand. Then she looked at the shattered remains of the glass she had just drained. A look of absolute, dawning terror washed over her face. It was the look of a person who realizes they have stepped off a ledge in the dark. Wait, she whispered. The microphone caught the wet, trembling sound of her breath. Wait, that glass. The one I took. She looked at the empty space on the table where her glass used to be. The clean glass. The one sitting in front of me. Caroline, she said, her voice shaking. Why haven't you drunk yet? I said nothing. I just lifted my glass, the clean one, in a mock toast. Sloane's knees buckled. She caught herself on the podium, sliding down slightly. I drank it, she said, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. I drank oh God. She looked at the camera, the red light, the live stream. Cut it, she screamed at Liam, her voice cracking. Cut it off. I didn't mean to. I didn't. She turned back to me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. You knew, she accused me, pointing a shaking finger. You switched them. You bitch. You switched them. The room erupted. Chairs scraped back. People stood up. The accusation hung in the air. Ugly and undeniable. She had admitted it. She had admitted there was something to switch. I didn't switch anything. Sloane, I said calmly, my voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. I just let you take what you wanted. You always take what you want, don't you? Sloane opened her mouth to scream, to deny it, to spin the story. But the drug hit its peak. Her eyes rolled back in her head. Her legs gave out completely. She collapsed. She didn't fall gracefully like a fainting damsel in a movie. She crumbled. She hit the floor in a heap of gold sequins and tangled limbs, the microphone falling with her, hitting the marble with a deafening screech of feedback. The live stream was still running. The guests were still watching, and I sat there, the untouched glass of water in my hand, watching the toast come to its inevitable, bitter end. The sweetness was gone. All that was left was the poison she had brewed for me, now burning in her own veins. The chaos that followed Sloane's collapse was not the frantic, noisy confusion of a bar brawl. It was a sharp, crystalline shattering of social order, magnified by the acoustics of a room designed for opera. Sloane lay in a heap of gold sequins at the base of the podium, her breathing ragged and amplified by the microphone that had fallen just inches from her face. Every gasp, every whimper, echoed through the Seabriar Conservatory like the soundtrack of a horror movie. Vivian Carlyle stood up. She did not rush. She did not knock over her chair. She simply rose from her seat with the slow, terrifying inevitability of a rising tide. She raised one hand, palm out, toward the band leader. "Cut the music," she commanded. Her voice was not loud, but it carried a weight that made the saxophone player freeze mid-note. The jazz died instantly. The silence that rushed in to fill the void was heavier than the sound had ever been. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room. "Lights," Vivian said, turning her gaze toward the back of the room. "Bring up the house lights, now." The romantic, moody twilight vanished. The overhead chandeliers blazed to life at full capacity, flooding the room with a harsh, interrogative brightness. There were no shadows left to hide in. Every face was illuminated. Every reaction was exposed. I remained seated. I felt Graham's body tensed beside me, a coiled spring ready to snap, but I placed a hand on his forearm to steady him. I needed to see this play out. I needed the evidence to be irrefutable. My parents, Martin and Denise, reacted exactly as I knew they would. They did not look at me. They did not ask if I was okay. They saw their golden child on the floor, and their instinct was to protect the perpetrator, not the victim. They rushed the stage. My mother's heels clicked frantically on the marble floor. "Sloane! Oh my God! Sloane!" my mother shrieked, falling to her knees beside my sister. She tried to pull Sloane up, but Sloane was dead weight, her limbs rubbery from the sedative she had intended for me. "Someone call a doctor. She is fainting. She is exhausted." My father turned to the crowd, his face red and sweating. He held up his hands in a desperate attempt to manage the PR disaster. "She is just dehydrated," he shouted, his voice cracking. "It is the heat. She has been working so hard on this wedding. She is just overcome with emotion." "I am not," Sloane mumbled. The microphone on the floor picked it up clearly. "I am not thirsty." "Hush, honey, hush," my mother soothed, trying to push the microphone away, but she only succeeded in knocking it against the podium base, creating a harsh metallic scrape that made the guests wince. "Don't talk, just breathe." "She drugged me," Sloane slurred, trying to push herself up. Her eyes were rolling, unable to fixate on anything. She pointed a limp finger in my general direction. "Caroline, she switched the glass." The accusation hung in the air. My father looked at me, his eyes narrowing into slits of pure fury. "Caroline," he barked, "what did you give her? What is wrong with you?" The audacity was breathtaking. Even as his favorite daughter lay on the floor admitting she had tried to dose me, he found a way to make me the villain. But before I could answer, Henri, the venue manager, stepped onto the riser. He was a man who protected his venue's liquor license with religious fervor. He had been alerted by Vivian, and he had been watching the monitors. "Mr. Callahan," Henri said, his voice cold and professional. "I suggest you lower your voice." "Don't tell me what to do," my father shouted. "My daughter is sick. We need an ambulance." "We have paramedics on standby," Henri said calmly. "They are on their way in, but this is not dehydration. Sir, and your other daughter did not give her anything," Henri signaled to the tech booth. "We have a strict security policy at the Seabriar," Henri announced to the room, "especially regarding the service of alcohol. We monitor the head tables specifically." My mother looked up, her mascara running. What are you talking about? I am talking about the fact that 10 minutes ago, our cameras recorded Ms. Sloane Callahan introducing a foreign substance into the bride's glass. Henri said. He did not use euphemisms. He spoke like a police officer reading a report. The room gasped. It was a collective, sharp intake of breath from 300 people. That is a lie, my mother screamed. Sloane would never. She is the maid of honor. Kira Vaughn stood up from her table. She walked up the stairs to the stage, her movements precise and predatory. She did not look at my parents. She walked past them and picked up the microphone from the floor. She dusted it off and stood at the podium, towering over my parents who were still kneeling on the ground. It is not a lie, Denise, Kira said. Her voice was the voice of a woman who had cross-examined murderers. It was flat, hard, and terrifying. And we are not going to debate it. Kira looked at the tech booth and nodded. Play it, she commanded. Behind us, the massive LED screen that had been displaying a looped monogram of CG flickered. The image changed. It was not a slideshow of childhood memories. It was a high-definition video clip, time-stamped from 15 minutes ago. The angle was perfect. It showed the head table. It showed Graham turning to hug his uncle. It showed me looking away. And then, clear as day, it showed Sloane, on the massive screen. Sloane's face was 10 feet tall. Everyone could see the look of calculation in her eyes. Everyone could see her hand dip into her purse. Everyone saw the small, clear capsule. Everyone saw her hand hover over my glass. Everyone saw the drop. The video played in silence, but the room was deafeningly quiet. Then, the clip cut to a second angle, the wide shot. It showed me returning to the table. It showed Sloane distracted by Vivian, and it showed me sliding the glasses. I did not add anything. I did not take anything out. I simply moved the poisoned glass to the right and the clean glass to the left. The video froze on the final frame, Sloane smiling, holding the glass she had poisoned, raising it to her lips. Kira leaned into the microphone. Self-defense, she said. 2 words, simple, absolute. The bride did not dose anyone. She simply declined to be dosed. The reaction in the room shifted instantly. It went from confusion to judgment. This was no longer a messy family drama. This was a crime scene. I saw the faces of the Carlyle family. They were not looking at me with pity anymore. They were looking at Sloane with revulsion. In their world, a breach of etiquette was bad, but a breach of the law was unforgivable. My mother stared at the screen, her mouth open. The evidence was giant, glowing, and irrefutable. She looked at the video, then down at Sloane, who was now barely conscious, her head lolling on my mother's shoulder. She was just joking, my mother stammered, her voice weak. It was just a prank, a sister thing. A prank, Graham spoke for the first time. He stood up. He pushed his chair back so hard it fell over. Graham Carlyle, the man who never raised his voice, the man who was always the diplomat, walked around the table. He did not go to Sloane. He came to me. He stood in front of me, placing his body between me and my parents. He crossed his arms, his posture defensive and threatening. You call poisoning my wife a prank? Graham asked. His voice was shaking with rage. You think risking her health, her safety, on our wedding night is a joke? Graham, please, my father started, standing up to face him. You are overreacting. Sloane has been under a lot of pressure. She made a mistake. A mistake is spilling wine, Graham said, stepping forward. My father actually took a step back. This was malice, pure, premeditated malice, and you are defending it. She is your sister-in-law, my mother cried. She is a liability. Graham spit the word out. And so are you. If you think this is acceptable, Graham turned to the security guards who had appeared at the edge of the stage. Get them out, Graham ordered. Get them all out. You can't kick us out, my father shouted. We paid for the flowers. We are the parents of the bride. I don't care who you are, Graham said. You are hurting my wife. Leave. I sat there, watching Graham's back. I had never seen him like this. He was burning bridges that I had been too afraid to light myself. He was severing the cords that had bound me to this toxic dynamic for 30 years. Sloane moaned on the floor. She tried to grab the podium to pull herself up again. Her hand slipped, her nails scratching against the wood. "My phone," she mumbled. "Where is my phone?" She was not worried about her health. She was not worried about the police. She was worried about her device. She managed to lift her head. Her eyes, glassy and unfocused, scanned the room. She was looking for something specific. She found it. To the right of the stage, Liam Vance was still standing there. He hadn't moved. He hadn't cut the feed. He was staring at his phone screen with a look of awe. The red live icon was still pulsing. Sloane squinted at him. The realization hit her brain slowly, fighting through the fog of the drugs. But when it landed, it hit harder than the floor had. "Liam," she croaked, "is it still on?" Liam looked up at her. He didn't look like her friend anymore. He looked like a journalist capturing a train wreck. "Yeah," Liam said, his voice carrying in the quiet room. "It is still on. Sloane, the numbers are insane. 70,000 people are watching." 70,000. Sloane's face went slack. It wasn't the drugs. It was the death of her ego. She realized that she hadn't just humiliated herself in front of 300 wealthy New Englanders. "She is radioactive." The paramedics arrived then, pushing through the doors with a stretcher. They marched up the stairs. Professional and brisk, they knelt beside Sloane, checking her pupils, taking her pulse. "What did she take?" The lead paramedic asked my mother. "I don't know," my mother wailed. "We need to know to treat her," the paramedic insisted. Sloane looked up at the paramedic. She looked at the camera that was still pointed at her. She looked at me. "It was Xanax," she sobbed. The truth finally forced out of her by survival instinct. "Crushed up. And vodka. Lots of vodka." "Okay, let's get her up," the paramedic said. "We need to pump her stomach." They lifted her onto the stretcher. Sloane Callahan, the lifestyle influencer, the golden child, the girl who demanded perfection, was strapped down with orange buckles. Her dress was stained. Her makeup was ruined. She looked small, pathetic, and broken. As they wheeled her past the head table, she looked at me one last time. There was no hate left in her eyes, just a vast, empty hole where her arrogance used to be. "I just wanted," she whispered as she passed me. "I just wanted to win." I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to fix it. I didn't feel the need to smooth her hair or tell her it would be okay. "You played a stupid game, Sloane," I said quietly, loud enough only for her to hear. "And you won a stupid prize." They wheeled her out. My parents ran after the stretcher, shooting me looks of venomous hatred as they left. My mother paused at the door to scream back at me. "You are dead to us. Caroline, do you hear me? Dead." Graham stepped in front of me again, blocking her view. "She is alive," Graham shouted back, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "She is finally alive. Now get out." The doors swung shut. The room was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of a storm that had passed, leaving the landscape altered forever. I looked at the guests. 300 people were staring at me. They were waiting to see what the bride would do. Would I cry? Would I run? Would I apologize for the scene? I stood up. My legs felt steady. My hands were not shaking. I picked up my glass of water. I walked to the center of the stage, stepping over the shards of Sloane's broken glass. I stood at the podium where my sister had just destroyed herself. I looked at the camera that Liam Vance was finally lowering. "You can leave now, Liam," I said. "The show is over." Liam nodded, looking a little frightened, and hurried away. I turned to the room. I looked at Vivian Carlyle. She gave me a slow, deep nod of approval. It was a coronation. I raised my glass. "I apologize for the interruption," I said, my voice clear and strong. "It seems we had some trash to take out." A few people laughed, then a few more. It was a release of tension. "But the air is cleaner now," I said, "and I would like to propose a toast." I looked at Graham. He was smiling at me with a look of awe and adoration that took my breath away. "To the truth," I said, "it tastes better than any cocktail." I drank the water. It was cool, clean, and safe. The room erupted in applause. It wasn't polite applause. It was thunderous. It was the sound of 300 people siding with the survivor. The band leader looked at me, his baton raised, waiting for a cue. "Play something loud," I told him. "We have a wedding to celebrate." The paramedics moved with a rhythmic, practiced efficiency that contrasted sharply with the chaotic, glittering mess of my wedding reception. They were not concerned with the thread count of the linens or the vintage of the champagne. They were concerned with the pulse of the woman in the gold-sequined dress who was currently losing consciousness on the stage. I stood a few feet away, my hand resting lightly on Graham's arm. The room was illuminated by the harsh house lights, stripping away the romance and leaving only the raw, ugly reality of the situation exposed. 300 guests sat in stunned silence, their eyes moving from the medical team to me, and then to my parents, who were hovering over the stretcher like vultures deprived of a meal. Sloane was fading, her eyes rolling back, her limbs heavy with the cocktail of vodka and Xanax she had intended for me. But as the lead paramedic tightened the strap across her chest, a moment of lucid panic seized her. She fought against the restraint, her hand clawing at the air, searching for purchase. "Wait," she gasped, the word wet and desperate. She looked around the room, her gaze sliding over the faces of the people she had tried so hard to impress. "It is wrong. The script is wrong." She tried to sit up, but the drugs were dragging her down like an anchor. She looked directly at me. In that moment, the arrogance was gone. The influencer persona was gone. All that was left was a scared, spiteful child who had played with matches and burned the house down. "I planned to make you look drunk," she slurred, her voice loud enough to carry in the dead silence of the conservatory. "I just wanted you to look messy. It was not supposed to be like this. It was not supposed to be me." The confession hung in the air, absolute and final. There was no spinning it. There was no sisterly prank defense. She had admitted to the intent, and she had admitted to the method. She had wanted to destroy my reputation to build her own, and she was crying because the weapon had backfired, not because she regretted pulling the trigger. Vivian Carlyle stepped forward. She did not look at Sloane. She looked at the police officer who had just entered the room, accompanied by the venue's security chief. "Officer," Vivian said, her voice cutting through the room like a diamond blade, "the Carlyle family will cooperate fully with any investigation. We have witnessed an attempted poisoning. We expect a full report." She turned to look at me, her expression softening into a fierce, protective pride. "And we will take every measure necessary to protect the honor and safety of the bride." Vivian added, "She is a Carlyle now, and we look after our own." It was a declaration of war against my biological family and a declaration of adoption into my new one. I felt a lump rise in my throat, not of sadness, but of relief. I had spent my life begging for protection from my parents, only to find it in the mother of the man I loved. My mother. Denise heard this and bristled. She turned from the stretcher, her face streaked with tears and mascara, her eyes wild with the frantic energy of a narcissist losing control. "How dare you!" she screamed at Vivian. "You are talking about my daughter like she is a criminal. She is sick. She made a mistake." Then she turned her rage on me. It was a familiar pivot. When Sloane failed, it was somehow always my fault for not catching her, for not saving her, or simply for existing as the yardstick she failed to measure up to. "And you?" my mother hissed, stepping toward me. "Look at you, standing there like an ice queen while your sister is being carted away. You did this, Caroline. You switched the glasses. You knew what was in there, and you let her drink it. You are a monster." "I am a survivor," I said calmly. My voice did not shake. "There is a difference." "We will sue you," my father shouted, his face purple. "We will tell everyone what you did. We will ruin you." Kira Vaughn stepped up to the podium, She held up a small silver flash drive. It caught the light, gleaming like a talisman. "You will not be suing anyone, Martin," Kira said, her voice bored and lethal. "Because I have the video. I have the venue logs. I have the sworn statements of the staff who saw Sloan tampering with the drinks. And just in case you think you can make this drive disappear, I have already uploaded the files to 3 separate cloud servers and emailed them to my firm's partners." Kira smiled, a shark-like baring of teeth. "Everything is backed up," she said. "The only thing getting ruined tonight is Sloane's reputation, and yours, if you do not lower your voice." My father opened his mouth to argue, but the reality of the situation finally hit him. He looked at the screen where the video had played. He looked at the police officer taking notes. He looked at the 300 guests who were staring at him with undisguised contempt. He had no leverage. He had no power here. But old habits die hard. My mother lunged for my arm, her fingers hooked like claws. "You fix this," she screeched. "You tell them it was a joke. You tell them to stop filming. You are the big sister. Do your job." I stepped back, out of her reach. I stood tall, smoothing the silk of my wedding dress. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me, and I felt nothing. No guilt, no obligation, no love, just a profound sense of closure. "My job," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room, "was to survive my childhood. I did that. My job now is to be happy, and you are no longer part of that job description." I turned to the crowd. I saw friends, colleagues, and family members. I saw the shock on their faces, but I also saw support. They knew what they had just witnessed. They knew who the villain was. "This is my wedding," I announced. "It is the first day of my life where I get to choose who sits at my table, so I am making a choice." I looked back at my parents. "If you love me, you can stay," I said, though I knew the condition was impossible for them to meet. "But if you want to manipulate me, if you want to abuse me, or if you want to make excuses for the person who tried to hurt me, you can leave." My mother stared at me, her mouth working silently. She waited for me to crack. She waited for me to apologize. "I am not leaving," my father blustered. "I paid for this reception." "Actually," Graham said, stepping forward. He signaled to the security team standing by the doors. "I paid for the bar, and since the bar is closed to you, I think it is time to go." 2 large security guards in dark suits stepped forward. They did not touch my parents, but their presence was a physical wall. They gestured toward the exit. "Please, sir," one of the guards said, "let us not make this a scene." "It is already a scene," my mother cried, but the fight had gone out of her. She looked at Sloan being wheeled away by the paramedics, and then she looked at me standing untouchable next to my husband. She realized she had lost both daughters in one night, one to hubris and one to freedom. They turned and followed the stretcher. My father muttered curses under his breath, clutching his tuxedo jacket as if it were armor. My mother sobbed loudly, playing the victim until the very last second, but no one moved to comfort her. The double doors swung shut behind them with a heavy, final thud. Sloan was gone. The parents were gone. The toxic element had been extracted from the room. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't tense. It was clean. It was the silence of a fever breaking. I looked at the empty space where the chaos had been. I looked at the shattered glass on the floor. I walked over to the podium one last time. I picked up the microphone. It felt light in my hand. "Thank you, everyone," I said. "Thank you for witnessing the wedding part of the evening." I paused, looking at Graham. He was smiling at me, a smile so full of love and respect that it made my knees weak in the best possible way. "And thank you for witnessing the end of the toxic part," I continued. "I apologize for the drama, but some things need to be brought into the light to be cleaned up. The show is over. My life is beginning." I signaled the band leader. "Hit it," I said. The band leader grinned and counted off. The brass section swelled, filling the room with the rich, soulful opening notes of "At Last." The tension in the room evaporated instantly. The guests erupted into applause, genuine, Joyous applause. They stood up, cheering, not for the drama, but for the resolution. They were cheering for the bride who had refused to be a victim. Graham walked up to the stage and offered me his hand. I took it. He led me down the stairs and onto the dance floor. We moved together, swaying to the music. The lights were warm again. The scent of the flowers seemed sweeter. The air felt lighter. I rested my head on Graham's shoulder. I could see Kira in the distance, raising a glass of champagne to me. I could see Vivian nodding approvingly. I thought about Sloane, currently in an ambulance, racing toward a hospital and a PR nightmare she would never wake up from. I thought about the video that was currently circulating the globe, the undeniable proof of her treachery. I thought about my parents, likely arguing in the parking lot, blaming everyone but themselves, and then I let them go. I didn't need to do anything else. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to fight. I didn't need to get my hands dirty. I had simply placed the truth in the center of the room and let them break themselves against it. Graham spun me around, and I laughed. It was a real laugh. Unburdened, free. The trap had been sprung, and I was the one who had walked away. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on how I handled my sister. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who need to see justice served.